Hi, my name is John McFetrich, and this is a video on producing a Snap clone um, on in iOS, and um, it is based upon um, a course I took on Udemy, and this Swift developers course, which is very good. But one of these sections was on building the Snap clone, and this is what my video is about. I'm mostly going to dive into how I did the back end, and they use Firebase. Well, Firebase is an interesting non-relational solution. I kind of more comfortable using Microsoft .NET framework and using Entity Framework for my database operations. So this is what this I will show how I blended together using iOS in the front end and .NET in the back end. Now, of course, and I did this using Visual Studio Community Edition on the Mac. And I must admit, all this was new. I had never played with Visual Studio on the Mac, and I must say I was quite pleased. And this is using, of course, ASP.NET Core, which is a little different from the traditional ASP.NET. It's just a leaner version of the .NET Core, and it runs across multiple platforms, and is, of course, open source, which a little nice little wrinkle for Microsoft. And a lot of this stuff will use terms like dependency injection. That's how we build up the .NET application. So first of all, my application is looks like this. I present here a login screen where you can either sign up new users or log in. And of course, as I said, this is going in the back end is going to be using .NET's identity services, and leveraging those, I don't have to write very little code to get in effect a membership provider. And the first thing, so if I log into, let's just change this user to Bill, and I log in to my backend, I can see I've got a snap here. Got a snap here from Fred. So I click on this and just see my result. And if they don't disappear, as I guess in Snap they do, if I want to build up a new one, I just hit the plus sign, and then I can select. I'm running on the phone on the simulator, so don't have much to choose from, and I just give this a label and hit the next button. And these are the users who I can send snaps to. So let's send this one to John. And I'm running in my debugger, so we'll just, whoops, we don't want to do that. I want to run past the breakpoint in this one. And there we go. We can see that we send our message. We grab the image from our local library on iOS and in the image library, and we've sent it up to our .NET server where we saved it in our database. And by the way, that database is SQLite. We hit the OK button, and if we now go back and we log into John, we should see a snap there. Log in. Yeah, and we see 2 snaps from Bill. And there we go. So I'm gonna now show you how I did this, and we're going to start with building up the .NET back end using Visual Studio. So the first thing we do would be go into our Visual Studio Community Edition, which is of course a free download, and we want to open up a new solution. We're going to make this our .NET Core Web API because this will give us the REST HTTP service that we need for our iOS application. And and then we're just going to let this default to the core 2.1. Let's just call this, I want this in test 3. This is my server, and so now we've opened up our project. The first thing we need to do is we need certain packages here. We need to run for this. We need, because we're going to be using SQLite and the entity framework. There are packages we need to load. So the first thing we do, we go into our NuGet, which is kind of our dependency manager, and we will select the tools we need, the .NET framework, the tools, and the design, and add these. Accept this. It's taking a little while here. I'm not sure why it's so slow. And now we need one more. I forgot SQLite, so I need to go back into here and find entity framework and SQL. Choose this one. There's several of these, but what you need is right here is this core.SQLite, and I'll just check first. Yes, and this is the one we want. So we're going to add this package. So we should now have all the packages added that we need. Now we're going to start to have the functionality. But remember, we're working with SQLite. SQLite is included with Mac OS 10, so there's nothing we have to install. However, there's a nice little tool here which you can download, this DB browser for SQLite, and I'll soon show you this. It's a great little tool for viewing our database, which in this case will actually just be a file. So we now have to start. We will now add the classes. Remember, we're working with the entity framework code first. So we don't deal with tables, we deal with entity classes. So we're now going to build up the classes that describe the entities we need for our backend functionality. And we're going to inherit all the functionality that's in identity, things like users and roles and claims that come with the identity, which is part of the entity framework. And we'll use our SQLite database for persisting the objects. So the first thing I need to go over here is go to our add a new folder here, and add a folder, and we're going to call this our models, because we're going to add a new model here. And the model we're going to add is my user. Just call it my user, and new. So now we're going to create my user. My user, it's going to extend identity user, so we're going to pick up all of the functionality that is baked into that class. And the next thing we need to do is to add a DB context. The DB context is going to the glue that's going to be let us persist these objects to the database and to retrieve, and it's going to allow us to create the tables not only for our Snap application as such, but also for all the identity classes. So we go back into models, and we're going to add another class here, and we're going to call it my DB context. So, and what we want this to extend the identity. We're going to extend identity DB context, and this is found in the identity.entity framework core. And so and the constructor here, now remember this context, if you, I guess you should say that if you don't know anything about DB context, you probably shouldn't be looking at this video, because it is the key to how to use the entity framework, particularly the code first. And so we need a special constructor here, and I'm just going to cut and paste this code. And we're going to change my default. And it needs to know about the entity framework core. So now we've got our context, and we're going to gradually add some more functionality to this, because this is what's going to contain what are called our sets, which are the objects that we will persist. So we now have our context. Now, so we're still working, we're exclusively working with our classes and objects, and we're going to continue to be. So we now go back over to our app settings, and we have to tell our app, so what we're doing here, we're telling the entity framework that we're going to be using this testing.db file. And this is where we're going to persist our objects to, and their objects gets then converted into tables. And now the next thing we need to do is go into our startup. And in startup, we just need to add, remember what we're doing this through dependency injection. So at our constructors, in this our constructor, we're going to include the services we need for our application. In this case, we need to have our DB. We need to have our DB context, and so we add the DB context to our services. So when our ASP.NET application is launched, we will include this functionality will be included with our application, and using this connection name. And then we should be pretty well good to go, when the only thing we need to do is to now look at migration, so that we're able to take and convert these classes into tables. Now the tooling that is associated with the .NET Core is not as good as maybe it is in the full-blown ASP.NET Entity Framework. So we have to here resort to a terminal. So I just open up a terminal session, and I'm going to make sure that I navigate to my test3 directory or folder. So if I do so, I'm in the right. Make sure I'm in the right place here. Yep. We go in, and we're going to do this .NET EF migrations add initial create, and so this will just take the objects or the entities in our model, and in our model we're going to create the tables, the backing tables in our database. So now it is run correctly, and if we go over to our little, this is the value of our little DB browser. We now look at our DB browser, and we should see. Oh, now we may need to do one more step here. We need to update our database. So now our table should be created. Yeah, so now if we go over and we look at our project, we do see, indeed, we see this a new file which was created called testing.db. And if we open this with our SQLite, our browser for SQLite, then we will see that indeed these tables were created, the roles, the user claims, logins, and this is what we're going to build, where we're going to build up our functionality. But now we have our a good foundation, including all the identity classes that we need.